The next session, it's on a very topical topic, AI or artificial intelligence. Kritika talked about disruption and AI in the morning. AI is again one of the most hotly discussed topic, both in terms of disruption, be it positive, negative. We've seen how AI is helping in the medical advancement, in helping companies further strengthen cybersecurity, but we have also seen incidents of deepfakes coming in. So how do we use AI will really drive how the world changes going forward. And the next session is on the topic, the AI arms race. And for that, if I can please invite the session chair, Mr. Charles Cowling, President of the International Actuarial Association on the stage. And can I now also invite a speaker, Mr. Sridharan. He dons various hats. He's an author, he's a CEO coach, he's a family business transformation advisor, he's an independent director, and also media consultant. So can I please invite? Hello. Charles, over to you.
So thank you. It's a very pleasure to be here for this really important topic, and delighted to have Mr. Srinath with us today. It's not news to you that AI is really important to us as actuaries, nor should it be news to you that AI is an arms race. So this session is really important. But we're not winning that arms race. We've got a lot more to go before we can really say with confidence that we as actuaries are embracing and using and maximizing the opportunities from AI. And it may be the case that AI won't replace actuaries, but actuaries with AI will definitely replace actuaries without AI. So it's up to all of us to see how we can individually participate in this arms race. And at the International Actuarial Association, we're hosting in a couple of months the first global conference of actuaries and AI, where we're hopefully going to bring hundreds of experts from around the world to have our attempt at empowering all of us to take the steps that we need to take as a global profession. So with that as an introduction, I'm delighted to welcome our expert speaker this morning, Mr. Srinath. Please, the floor is yours. We're delighted to hear what you've got to say to us today.
Hi, good afternoon. So thank you to Anurag and Mayur and the Institute for inviting me today. And something that's very interesting to note, and I'm very mindful of time, because for the speaker who's just before lunch, I need to give you food for thought before you head to food. So let me do this. The KPI, I mean, actuarians and all professionals like us need a KPI, right? So my KPI today is very simple. You might agree or disagree with what I present, but I can tell you, you will not go without being provoked. My job is to provoke you. So if you have sleepless night today and next couple of days, I think I've done my job. So I've heard a couple of speeches and I spoke to people about what was presented yesterday. And it's almost as if AI is the best Valentine's Day gift, right? I mean, that's the kind of tone that I'm hearing. And it is not. And that's what I want to present. If you think AI is the best thing that happened to the world, it is not necessarily so. And my argument is this. We have something called HI, right? Human intelligence. And we are betting big, not on human intelligence, but we're betting big on AI. But AI is also an engine that has left the platform or the station, as we call it. There's no turning back now. And the summary of what I want to present is, how do you weaponize finance or are we going to see weaponization of finance through AI? At the same time, there are lots of positives to AI, lots of good things that it is going to add. So let me start. Three questions I want to address in the next 15 minutes. The first one is, in the absence of AI regulations, mind you, I mean, a lot of governments and regulators are speaking about regulations, but we don't have one formally around the world. And how do you actually regulate something that is still emerging with greater velocity or acceleration? I want to give a phrase called, we have all used, in the last 10 years, we've used the phrase called exponential growth, at least in the Indian market. The decade previous to that, we used the mathematical word called serial growth. Our mathematical series seems to be changing. So which means that we have moved to a velocity, what I call as to the power of AI, which means it's fearful, we don't know, but it's massive and huge. How do you regulate in such a scenario? And we have used, I've heard a lot of phrases like data sets are evolving and so on and so forth. How do you actually protect our own data sets in India? The second question that I want to kind of provoke is actually an AI safety institute even possible? And theoretically, if it is possible, what are those constructs going to be? And the last one that I want to address, especially the global context and more of the Indian context, 2/3 of India is what I call as gems. Gig economy, millennial and Generation Z. And for everything that we do, how do we actually bring responsibility of financial services and regulations around it? A quick definition, I think we'll skip a lot of these covered by the previous speakers. One, AI is not new. It's been around for 70 years. And let's give credit to ChatGPT. I think the last year we all started using the word AI. Almost 20 years we have abused the word called strategy. The last 5 years we have abused the word called ESG. And now we are abusing AI. But AI has been around for 70 years. I mean, that's a brutal truth of it. Financial services has been using it for the last 40, 50 years. Your ATMs, your phones, your mobile banking. Today, if you're using a Google map, which all of us have been using for 10, 15 years, it's AI. And yet, suddenly, we have woken up to the best thing after sliced bread, AI. But let's talk about what are the challenges. How do we regulate? There are algorithms. And if you cannot go back and trace and audit an algorithm, and if you cannot hold somebody who's done this to be accountable, you have a problem in financial services. What it means is, today you go back to whatever you write in an Excel sheet, simple Excel sheet. You can go back and say who created that file, when was this created, and what is the actual formula or the logic written there. In AI data sets, we don't have that. And I'll give you a simple example. Does anybody work in the health insurance space here? Simple example of is one there. The most fatal cancer, the breast cancer, is the triple negative marker breast cancer. And India has a lot of those cases. And guess what? The data sets that we use to underwrite that or to even define that it is part of that particular health issue is not even an Indian data set. We still use what's the Western world definition of what that means. So I just want to give one example, right? I mean, if you're going to create new data sets as we very broadly and loosely use, where are we going to start? It's not easy, it's not cheap, it'll take time, it'll have a lot of cost implications. So that's the first point about complexity of regulating AI. If we can't even regulate the data that we use, how do you go and regulate the technology players? And mind you, there's not a single Indian one. And there's a context to it, Web 2 of the internet. We are already in Web 3. Almost all the large global players are all the Western companies. And there's a challenge from the geopolitical angle of it as well. So which is why I call it AI is going to be probably the hottest global Cold War. While the nations want to say that they will collaborate, we recently saw the UK host multiple nations, and we had a collaborative agreement to share AI regulations and boundaries. And I think it's a kind of fallacy, because what's going to control the 21st century worlds and markets and people and corporations and profits? It's AI. We're not going to fight necessarily with arms and ammunition. It's the data. And that is why I call it as weaponization of finance. The race for dominance is not just about having the next large machine. It's not just probably oil. We call data, if data is the new oil, then the World War III potentially is going to be around data. So I'm actually kind of a little cynical there. If countries say that, oh, we will collaborate and we will share and whatever happens, guess what? Each country is throwing trillions of dollars. US has done that, China has done that, Germany is doing that, to say who's going to be the next AI supremo of sorts. And I think it's already a very, very large commercial market. $15 trillion as of today is what is AI services. So if you think that we're all going to come and meet at the G20 or a UN event and say we'll all work together, I don't buy the narrative of what we have seen 20th century geopolitics. So being ignorant of saying that it will be a level playing field, not really. What about guardrails? Why am I very bullish about guardrails is very simple. Guardrails are a classic example in the motor insurance parlance. The first thing you ask somebody if somebody has had an accident is, do you have a driving license? You don't worry about, did you actually hit? That's the second question. Do you have a driving license? Which means, by law, are you following the convention and are you eligible to drive? That's the first question. So the guardrail in the automobile or the road safety is about actually defining who's eligible to drive and how and when and how not. Regulations came in much later. So you define guardrails, but if you tell me that roads and driving is the most safest thing on earth, I don't think so. There are lesser air accidents as incidents of number of people flying than road travel. So it says something about how do you evolve regulations. So which means AI also we have a challenge. It is emerging, it is changing so rapidly, we will need guardrails. But guess what? For most of the corporates that I see, I work with or sit on the boards, AI is a very fashionable conversation, and we don't even know where the data sets in those companies reside. And guess what? Cloud. The data of cloud is not even local. Except for one country, UK has proposed a law where if you are a cloud service provider to financial services institution, the financial regulators can also regulate those companies. That's the first time you're hearing somebody talk about data governance. We don't have it in India. So some of those challenges of what data do I have, and it's a sovereign safety, right? If a foreign country has health data of citizens of a competing nation, that's a strategic issue. So some of those we will have to address it in what we call as the guardrails and regulations. Who's going to define that? And I think the larger challenge is going to be accountability, privacy, and so on and so forth. What are the risks? The obvious challenge, data, the data management. I think fundamental is that data trustworthy? Who's going to define what is trust? And if we don't have a data that is trustworthy, there's no point in even working with it. If each of us have the same set of data and we work on it, and if the data is fundamentally flawed, the collective effort of this group is going to be flawed. So that's where I think the larger narrative of don't rush in just because you claim to be working with AI data sets. Question the very fundamental basic. Because we go back in IT, we always say, right, garbage in, garbage out. And I think that's so true even in AI data sets. Creating data sets is not cheap. I mean, we all think of data sets as Excel sheets and lines and rows and columns and multiple Excel sheets. It's not so. And I think that is where we'll have to start. Fundamentals of how do we protect. We exist as financial services because somebody trusts us, consumers. And their data is what we have as trust. And a lot more needs to be done in terms of cybersecurity, data security. And if I look at what the Indian regulators have been consistently bringing in terms of regulations, I think it's for the larger systemic interest. It's not just about anti-industry as I keep hearing. What if we capture all this into a theoretical safety institute? Is it even possible? I think we'll have to start somewhere. It's almost like saying a driving school, creating a driving school. If you have to learn driving, you have to create a driving school. Somebody has to teach you driving. Somebody has to sit you down and have exams. And I think Safety Institute will also have similar ones, but it has to address few things. Continuous research on AI risks. AI risks are not there yet. What I mean, a simple example, underwriting software bugs that we have typically. All of us might use the same software, but only few of us might have a bug, because that bug is created by a certain data or an incident. It doesn't mean that that bug is permanent for all of us. So very similarly in AI usage, we will see risks that will keep cropping up, and probably for the next many, many years. It's too premature to say that we understand AI. We don't. I think we'll have to let it go, which means how do we constantly research? So if I were to have a wish list from the actuarial institutes, is how do you actually bring together knowledge on various risks that you see, emerging risks? Because the business of insurance is pricing the risk. And this is a business which it will always have risks. Newer risks will emerge. How do we understand that? Two, how do we actually put together standards and guidelines on what will constitute AI deployment? And what is the right one? Simple things like if you have a KYC or eKYC, with deepfakes, what is the bigger worry? Is the person who's actually claiming something actually the person? Did the incident actually take place? So we'll have to go back to the first principles of questioning everything that is being said and done. And the third one, I think there needs to be a lot more unlearning that we need to do about what we understood as technology. I mean, we almost put technology on a pedestal. It is important. But don't underestimate human intelligence. I think we'll have to somewhere, as I always say, at least in the Indian context, we have about 300 million Indians who are in the bottom of the pyramid. So while we will be very exuberant to say technology will uplift the rest, we also have to ensure that it doesn't push the 300 million down. So technology has to be very, very carefully adopted. GEMS, one of the questions I asked is how do you deploy AI in financial services? I think very simple. Gig economy, millennials, and Gen Z. I mean, today constitute 2/3 of India, which means guys like me are on borrowed time. We're the outliers who actually break that statistics. What are some of the worrisome factors? Worrisome factors, very simple. I think the good factor, the next 35 years, productive labor as defined by ILO, we will meet. But where are those 800 million jobs? That's a big question for a country like India. If you have 1.4 billion Indians and 2/3 less than 35, you must have 800 million jobs, notionally. And I think that's going to be the fundamental challenge for actuarians. How are you going to define retirement contributions and safety nets, financial safety nets for the future, if there are no concepts of permanency of jobs? I think that's one angle that I want to bring in, because when you're going to create insurance policies for life or health, how are you going to bring some of these definitions? And the old school definition of what constituted safe human being, safe individual. If somebody had a job, we said safe. But today, I think by choice, the youngsters are saying, I don't need necessarily permanent jobs. I want to have the flexibility to follow my dream, go backpacking. I want to earn when I want. I want to not necessarily own assets. So some of these concepts you will have to bring into your risk models. And I don't hear that conversations at all. We are still, I think, somewhere stuck in the 1970s and 80s. We want to be a capitalist market, but we're stuck in the socialist world. I think that's something that the institutes should bring about, that empathy. The good thing about GEMS are very simple. They constantly upskill themselves. And it's also because of the nature of the industry. There's so much of unlearning happening. They need to constantly upskill themselves. But we also have seen, if I look at the Indian numbers, the savings rate has dropped to 26% of GDP from 38 about 10 years ago. Which means we have moved away from what constituted good behavior of being frugal to spend. And of course, it also has a multiplier effect on the economy. We call it the consumption economy, but it comes with its own risk. Wealth creation, good thing is the wealth creation is probably the top goal for 80% of millennials, and most of them take their own financial decisions. Again, the challenge is here. If they're going to take robo-advisory services to take financial decisions, and if that decision is flawed, they may not have money to survive till they retire. So there's also a sense of responsibility that the industry should bring about of how do you do this? Gen Z is going to actually surpass millennials as the most populous generation on earth. 1/3 of the world is Gen Z. And that's scary. It's scary because how do you build a future? Because there was a time that we all said that we will work till 60, retire with some money, some corpus, social security, probably live the next 10 years. Today we're also living longer. And I'm very worried about the GEMS phenomenon. If at 40 you're forced to retire because you're not able to upskill, and you live till 85, for the next 45 years, how are you going to feed yourself? That's the biggest challenge, and we don't have solutions in retirement planning there. And I think we're also living in their world. And the last one I want to speak about is their attention span. Much has been spoken about that Gen Z has less attention span. I don't think so. Their attention span is what I would call as very focused when you can grab their attention. If something interests them, which is what is reflecting in humanitarian causes, the conversations around diversity and inclusion, which means as an industry, we also have to evolve. How do we get their attention to what matters the most? And that's also the hope about, somebody spoke about sustainability, climate change. My hope is this: my generation did nothing for the last 40 years about climate change. The rich nations have not actually issued a single rupee, or they keep speaking about funding climate change and climate actions for the developing nations. My hope is the Generation Z will do something, because there is no what I call as planet B. We think of plan B, but there's no planet B. And I think some of these learnings actually add to those cynicism about what we think the world will be. So let me talk about, as to close this, AI in actuarial sciences is already there. It's not new. You have been using it for modeling. You have been using it for actually risk calculations, predictive analytics, so on and so forth. The challenge is going to be the ethical consideration. I always say, I need one neck to hold for every project. I can't hold a computer. Who is that person in charge of an output or an outcome? And I think that's what organizations are going to go back and grapple with. Who is responsible for decisions? So going back to the first 3 questions I laid out. In the absence of AI regulations, hopefully and assumably for the next many years, we will have regulations because governments cannot let things be. And they will bring regulations. But your data privacy and cyber security will keep evolving. So what is good won't be good enough, is my point. And financial services is going to be completely challenged for the simple fact you're sitting on tons of data. I just need to tinker with 1 decimal point somewhere for your model to go wrong. I'm oversimplifying the risk in the AI. AI Safety Institute will happen eventually. US and UK have already announced that. And of course, with different varying degrees of participation, US is mandatory for institutes to provide data, whereas UK is voluntary. India will, I think, have a hybrid model there. But the point is, how will institutes like actuarial institutes or insurance sectors, because you are a resilient sector. You work with data, what is going to be needed 20 years hence. It's not about today. It's not about lending today. So which means that what you do today is actually going to have a very profound impact when actually the customer gets paid off. I think that's going to put a lot more challenge. And the third one, I think more important one, is how do you define newer products for GEMS? I think that's a big market. Don't think of the conventional way you sold insurance saying an annual premium. Can you make pay-per-use? You'll have to think like a youngster. You'll have to think how they spend. Can you do models which are very, very unconventional? And I think that is how insurance penetration is going to increase. The conventional way of selling insurance, I think, is probably dead and gone, but we're still flogging the dead horse. And I think we'll have to change that. Thank you.
Wow, that was a wonderful tour de force and a challenging walk through the many risks and opportunities that we as a profession face. I loved your challenges around the data privacy and security issues that we face, your vision for an AI safety institute. How can we tap into the behavioral science issues that are affecting Gen Z? Problems around where does the data reside? Where is trustworthy data? Issues of cybersecurity and data security. And how do we deploy AI effectively in financial services? So many questions. How do we upskill ourselves? How do we remain relevant? Lots of risks and opportunities. Will we all retire at 40? And is that a risk or an opportunity? And what are the challenges around ethics? Who's responsible for decisions? So much food for thought, Srinath. Really, thank you. So two questions from me, if I may, given all of that background. Given everything that you've said around all of the many challenges, where would you see the real priority for us as actuaries? What do we really need to focus on? And any tips that you can give us there. And secondly, I do love this idea of the AI Safety Institute. As actuaries, we have a code of conduct. We like to think that we act ethically. You remind us that what is good may well not be good enough. But how do we influence those who are setting up the AI Safety Institutes, and can actuaries have a seat at that table?
Sure. I think very valid questions. I think first point we'll have to observe is actuarians as a profession are not even generally known and recognized outside of insurance. I think more actuarians, if we can have in the corporate world, I think better it is for the concept of risk management. I think that's a task for the actuarial institutes around the world. Two, I think in the entire AI narrative, I think we need more caution than exuberance. It's always like we are seeing out in the tech startup world, we always, in the financial services at least, we keep hearing about stifling innovation versus regulator allowing for newer ideas. And there is a word of caution there. You can't undo what an AI has done. It's like saying, I'm sorry I shot you. Now you take time to recover. Can't help it there. I think that's a challenge where actuarians can come with, can you come with risk models, question everything? I think that's a challenge because in the boardrooms, as I said, we have moved away from strategy and ESG now to AI. That's the next buzzword. It will save a lot of CEOs' jobs for the next terms. I think a lot of them will use that to get another term at the office. And I'm being deliberately provocative here. I think actuarians have to come back and say, do you really need AI and what level of AI deployment do you need in every industry? Like, if you look at, we are not even still speaking about quantum computing, and I can give you some quick glimpse, 30 seconds glimpse, is this, if quantum computing becomes real, if brain-computer interface, BCI, becomes commercially available, and with AI, what will humans do? We are going to probably have like a Fitbit or a chip in our brain where you don't need to type. You think, the computer is recognizing what you think. And you have quantum computing, which means the power of computing is phenomenal. And with AI tools, what do we really do? It's almost like saying when the child is born, a designer DNA, The child can have an implant of whatever subject it wants to be master's or PhD in. But what will that child do for the next 80 years of its life? So I'm saying that there is a fundamental concept of how productive labor, what do people do, and even if you give somebody all the wealth on earth, and you tell them don't do anything for 12 hours a day, just sit staring at the wall, they can't. The mind is the monkey. So I think the fundamental construct of question everything, and I think actuarians are the right people to do it. But I don't hear much of actuarians actually demanding or putting out thought leadership. I mean, I think the return gift on the Valentine's Day the Institute is giving is the compendium of research papers that have come in. And I read the first one on actually speaking about AI and data sets. A lot of work to be done. I think there's a phenomenal collaboration of actuarial institutes around the world sharing. And I think that is how you'll automatically get a seat at the table. Thank you.
One question from Mr. Frank Chang, and then we will break for lunch. I'm getting, so quick, Frank, and then we need to let these good people go for lunch.
Just a bit of correction. There already exists a quantum computer. The quantum computer the largest one right now is 1,121 qubits. And they're increasing in size. For brain-computer interface, there's Neuralink by Elon Musk, and there's also something called OpenBCI, which is something that you could buy yourself and tinker around with. But I do agree with your call that actuaries should be leaders. I think we all could learn more about evolving technology and understand the risks. But I do think that there are some of us already there, and just wanted to make sure that that's recognized.
Sure. So just to give a context about the qubit and the quantum computing, I think while the nations are pumping in money, I mean, IBM, as one single entity, is coming out of the first 1,000 qubit machine this year. And I think that's a challenge, right? As technology gets affordable and mass, how do we actually get to the table? And more opportunities for everybody.
Great, thank you very much. That was really food for thought as we head into lunch, and a big thank you for that very interesting session. Thank you.
And thank you, Charles, for doing my job as well, helping us close the event. Thank you so much. Can I please request Karthike Tandoi to be on stage and give a small token of thanks to our chair and panel.